electric motors and DC generators.
But Mr. Batchelor promised me that I
don't care what he promised you. I employ people and I define what they do in my company, and you, young man, will have to work hard to prove your value to me.
Of course, I was never given the chief engineer position. I was an immigrant with 4 cents in my pocket. I had 2 options to choose from. I could beg in the street, or show that man my worth. I began to work like a man possessed. For 6 months, I worked myself to death repairing DC electric motors 18 to 20 hours a day. But the more I worked, the more I understood that direct current was not perfect at all. So I started to design my own concept of a motor which would be able to produce a new kind of current, alternating current. As opposed to Edison's preference, direct current, alternating current is changing its magnitude and direction all the time. These changes are called the frequency. But the most important difference between AC and DC is that the direct current power plant using the usual voltage can transmit electricity effectively really no more than 1 mile. This means that in order to illuminate New York using direct current power plants, we had to build a huge network of local stations. But with alternating current, this would not be the case. Using AC to illuminate New York, we needed only 1 big power plant.
I have been told that you've been working double shifts. Why is that? Can't you keep up with your own job?
I can. But I'm also working on the AC machine as well.
But AC makes no sense. My DC generator works perfectly.
Well, not quite.
Show me.
It could be improved. Take a look at what I've designed here.
You have some brains, but you're a foolish immigrant. Now hear this. If somehow your crazy ideas can manage to improve my inventions, I will pay you $50,000. Understand?
I'll do it. But I didn't give up on the idea of using direct current to generate power. I fully immersed myself into the work and soon was able to present Edison with not 1, but 24 different improved direct current motors. Here are all my drawings, sir.
Not bad. That is, not bad for an immigrant.
So when will I be getting my $50,000?
50,000? Young man, you don't seem to understand American humor. Taking into account your efforts, I'm willing to increase your salary from $18 a week to, let's say, $26 a week.
Business by nature is filled with cheating. And there was nothing uniquely American. The 2 years after I left Edison were very hard. I had not a penny to my name. I never took money too seriously. I never did, except for at that terrible time. At that time, I worshipped every penny. My breakfast cost 4 cents. My dinner cost the same. And sleeping on a floor at night cost me 5 cents. This lasted for a year. In order to earn my living, I had to find part-time jobs. Day laborer, porter, digger of ditches. I lived for the moment. I had no money to think about tomorrow. When autumn came, I rented a single bed in a common room for 10 cents a night. What a luxury. Edison must have been gloating. But one day, everything started to change. My friend Brown introduced me to entrepreneurs who were interested in electricity, and they invested money in my talent. It was an amazing transformation. In one moment, I went from being a beggar to becoming co-owner and manager of a serious company dealing with the installation of new arc lamps in the streets. I thought it was ironic that I rented an office next to Edison's company. We had received many orders from all over America for our electrical products. Our business quickly became a success. I created models of generators, transformers, and all the necessary equipment for the operation of two-phase alternating current devices. I believed that alternating current was the future, although to others at that time my ideas seemed absurd. And finally, on the 1st of May 1888, I received 2 patents for my AC generator. The war of currents had begun. Mr. Westinghouse.
Mr. Tesla, I'm so happy to meet you at last. Let's get straight to business. You know the Edison power plants are reliable. However, here's what I need. I need a solution that allows me to transmit electricity over long distances to my power plants. So, you see, currently I am looking for a better engineering solution.
Well, I have some ideas here. Edison's direct current power plants dominated the nation's power needs. By 1887, almost 100 DC power stations were operating in America. Direct current has no frequency and doesn't change direction. DC generators can be connected much more easily and were more convenient for accumulating stations, but the DC has one huge disadvantage. Because of power losses in the wires, it is extremely difficult and expensive to transmit its power over long distances. After carefully examining Edison's DC patent, the famous industrialist George Westinghouse came to the conclusion that my AC generators were much more effective. So he offered me $1 million for all the patents I already had, and promised to pay $1 for each horsepower produced by generators designed by me. So I became a consultant for Westinghouse. That day I gave my dear friend Brown a check for $500,000 for everything he did for me. A new era began in my life. Together with Westinghouse, we created the first stable working AC generator. Finally, Edison realized that his reign as the electricity king was coming to an end.
Sir, a letter for Mr. Tesla.
Edison immediately brought a lawsuit against us for infringement on his patents. But of course he lost, as all my inventions were authentic. It was after that he started to play dirty. At Edison's instigation, a new type of execution was adopted. The electric chair. And of course it used my alternating current. Poor Westinghouse objected and even hired a lawyer for Kemmler, who was the first person in the world to be sentenced to death by electric chair. What a grisly way to die. Despite all Edison's attempts to discredit my inventions and tarnish my reputation, my alternating current became more and more widespread. Westinghouse and I were gaining ground in this war of the currents. But the sweeping success of AC played a cruel joke on my benefactor and supporter Westinghouse. One day his investors remembered about the agreement I had made with Westinghouse. He was obligated to pay me $1 for each horsepower generated by alternating current. By that time, there were so many AC generators, I would have received $12 million and been one of the richest men in the world. But the man who believed in me and in my alternating current would go bankrupt. So I tore up my contract with him. Westinghouse had to continue his fight. For years I worked in my laboratory studying magnetic fields and high-frequency currents. It was a productive period for me. As a result of my work, I received many patents, almost as many as Edison. As a result, the American Institute of Electrical Engineers invited me to lecture about my achievements in front of the most prominent electrical engineers of that time. I lit lamps simply by putting them in an alternating electromagnetic field. I showed how to transmit electricity without wires. I sent out lightning and used my hands to pass a current of 1,000,000 volts through my body. It was a huge success. I received a great ovation, and for the first time was called by my peers a man of the future. They offered me Faraday's chair, saying that since his death, no one else had been worthy to sit in it. Then they let me sip the whiskey from Faraday's cherished bottle. It was a great honor. Edison, of course, could not stand them recognizing me. On the 13th of March, 1895, there was a fire in my laboratory on South Fifth Avenue. All of my property was burned, as well as all the records for the last 10 years. As a result of the fire, I went completely bankrupt. Of course, Edison was not so stupid as to leave any evidence that he was behind the fire. But who else could have benefited from this? Within half a year, my business began to thrive again. Instead of starting from the beginning to rebuild what I had created, I restored everything from memory. Thanks to me, Westinghouse triumphed over Edison, winning a huge contract for the construction of a hydroelectric power plant at Niagara Falls. The newly formed company of Niagara Falls invested $100,000 in my research. With this money, I set up a great laboratory at 46 Houston Street, where I constructed a unique mechanical oscillator, which I used to do research on selective resonance. I showed various interesting experiments, and we talked about the future of science. Those evenings were unforgettable. I met most of these people thanks to my friendship with Robert Johnson, the chief editor of Century magazine, and his wife, Catherine. Catherine and I became great friends because we shared a great love of poetry. I never met a woman with such exquisite literary taste. Together, she and I even translated and published a collection of Serbian poetry. But the poetry we were most impressed by were the poems of Jovan Zmaj. Honor can't be bought with gold, for an honest man can't be sold, since he needs it like the sun. The dishonest man would surely sell. But everyone knows quite well. As for honor, he has none. Yes, Robert was a dear friend of mine. And as for Catherine, oh, I loved her as much as a man can love a woman. And she loved me. But she was my good who were researching the electric potential of thunderstorms. It was they who invited me there. The fact that Colorado Springs is located in a zone of strong geomagnetic activity intrigued me. What this means is, there are more thunderstorms in that area than there is sunshine. The local engineers wanted to know if there is any way to accumulate the energy produced by lightning strikes and then use it. Of course, I could not pass up a chance to participate in such a unique experiment. The laboratory I built there was ideal. I put up a sign there saying, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," and began to do my geomagnetic research. In the center of my lab, I built this massive transformer. One end of its primary winding was grounded, and the other end I raised to a great height. As a result, this device was able to store energy and produce a lightning-like current of several million volts and a frequency of 150,000 hertz. But I wanted more. I wanted to know whether this technology could transmit energy wirelessly over long distances using the ground as a transmitter. Not far from the lab, I put 200 bulbs in the ground and waited for a storm. As soon as the ball at the top of the mast was struck by lightning, my laboratory came to life. The transformer collected the lightning energy and threw it into the atmosphere with triple force. Try to imagine it. I had created man-made lightning that was 40 meters long. The energy flow covered the city. The entire city was literally saturated with electricity. I didn't expect such an effect, but my theories had been proven. I was able to transmit an electric charge wirelessly across the ground. 200 bulbs were lit at a 25-mile radius from the Tower Razam. Unfortunately, the local power station was not ready for such a large-scale experiment. The city's generator simply burnt out. After that incredible experience, I wrote an article about the possible uses of currents transmitted by high-frequency standing wave energy. Decided to meet with me. Imagine how much benefit wave energy could have for mankind.
That sounds interesting. I want you to work on the development of radio communications. I need a cheap but reliable connection that will work so I can communicate over long distances. To get you started, I'll give you $150,000 to cover your costs of research. After that, we'll talk.
Radio. What mediocrity. But I agreed to what Morgan asked of me, to have the opportunity to continue working on the wireless transmission of electricity. We bought several acres of land on Long Island and started the construction of a wireless transmission power station. It was a 57-meter tower frame with a steel shaft that went deep into the ground. A huge copper hemisphere which worked as a powerful amplification transmitter was installed at the top of the huge structure. The idea for the project was to use the resonant buildup of the ionosphere. I was sure that I could accumulate the energy extracted from the air anywhere in the world and use that energy in any kind of form, as an explosion of thousands of bombs or a man-made aurora borealis. I lit the sky for thousands of miles. However, Morgan, that blind man, wasn't inspired.
There's something I still don't get. How can we use your light show for the purpose of transmitting radio signals?
I'll explain, sir. The real future use of this experiment is
As you know,
communicating by
Marconi
means...
sent radio signals from England to Canada 5 years ago. I invested in you because I knew about your outstanding abilities. But after what I've seen today, I still need a radio!
Mr. Morgan. Sir! Sir, with this plant we can send energy for thousands of miles, not just some radio signals. You could have a second wireless tower
I am not
near the Niagara
interested
Falls
in
New
things
York.
unless they give me an immediate commercial profit. I need radio signal transmissions.
Marconi! I want you to know I was 3 years ahead of Marconi, that simpleton. And that Russian Popov. In 1893, I developed my first radio 5 years before them.
Of course you understand. What I'm saying is this is all about...
Morgan cut off all his funding. The Wardenclyffe project was shut down. In 1917, in the middle of the First World War, the tower, which could have been the beginning of free electricity, was destroyed. The United States government suspected that German spies might somehow secretly use the tower as a radio transmitter. However, Morgan didn't stop me from managing to achieve something monumental. I was able to conduct only one complete experiment under the Wardenclyffe project, but how great it was! To avoid any loss of life, I found the most remote location in eastern Siberia and sent through the ionosphere a huge burst of energy to Tunguska, and that is where it exploded. The entire northern hemisphere saw that light that I had created. one who invented the ability to control ships and airplanes by radio frequency. I introduced the first radio-controlled ship in 1898 during the New York Electrical Exhibition. Once I had perfected this technology, I brought about the era of larger, more practical toys. My research and experiments made it possible to control a warship remotely from the shore at a distance of 25 nautical miles. You see, it's really quite simple. Continuous control is possible via an automatically received signal of disparity between the desired and present location of the ship you're controlling, so you can make any object move to wherever you want. Naturally, the military immediately seized on the opportunity to control warships using radio waves. Since that time, the Pentagon has kept their eye on me. It is impossible to refuse them. At their request, I invented a radar locator to detect enemy submarines. Originally, I designed this instrument to search for minerals. I had other great ideas they could use. I was able to generate powerful electromagnetic fields that bend light and radio waves around any object, making the object completely invisible. This project was called Rainbow, but I doubt whether you have ever heard of it. The military can keep its secrets. Once I decided to prove to the general public that energy is present in the air, so I designed and assembled an 80-horsepower alternating current electric motor. Then I installed it in a new car, replacing the gasoline engine as its power source. My electric motor functioned flawlessly for an entire week without an additional power source. It also accelerated the car up to a speed of 150 kilometers per hour. But to my great surprise, none of the entrepreneurs or the public were interested in my invention. It was astounding. Was there really no one who would be interested in something that cannot be sold? Because people would never have to pay for energy from the air. At that time, a couple of newspapers published articles accusing me of having connections with the evil spirit. This deeply offended me. I took my motor and never again showed it to anyone. Nobel Prize in Physics. But I refused it. The reason? They wanted me to share it with Edison. I must admit, to his credit, Edison did the same. However, I couldn't refuse the gold medal of Edison given to me by the Institute of Engineers and Electrical Technicians. But the very sound of the name Edison annoyed me. So I cut the medal in half and used the gold to pay 2 of my secretaries for their work. In the first quarter of this century, everybody went mad because of the popularity of a new medium, radio. People with money to invest didn't want to talk about anything except that damned radio. I thought the idea of radio was old news and did not want to take part in any of their revelry. But in 1926, the heirs of Colonel Astor asked me to rework the radio transmitter to improve the quality of radio communications. I agreed, only for the sake of my old friend. While testing my equipment, I suddenly caught mysterious signals that were generated by some kind of technology. According to my calculations, they were sent from Mars, with a probability of 94%. But it happened only once. Perhaps it was because Mars was closer to the Earth than it had been in several thousand years. The signals stopped, and I could never prove that I had really caught the radio signals from Mars. But my contact with Mars had become the talk of the town. H.G. Wells mentioned my experience in his novel, The First Men on the Moon. There is definitely someone out there. Someone who wants to meet us just as we want to meet them. I believe someday we will meet them, creatures that can overcome the stellar abyss. We could learn so much from them.